want to welcome you to our theme today, Scrum Mastering in non-IT teams. My name is Riina Hellström and I am the founder of Agile Meetup community, and together with me I have a fantastic Agile wizard called Steve Robinson. Steve has been with us. First, we worked with Steve and Steve's team, and now Steve is working with us, which we are really happy about. And I will hand over to Steve to do an introduction of yourself, and I might add on a couple of interesting points that I've learned during these years, if you're not bringing them up. But please, Steve, very much welcome. Thank you for being with us. I can't wait to have this conversation with you.
Thanks, Riina. Yeah, and welcome everybody. It's great to be with you all today. So, yeah, my name's Steve Robinson. I've been a Scrum Master since 2009. So I started my journey in the dark arts in IT and learnt my trade there. But it got to a point where I was actually thinking, this framework, this way of working, this mindset, I'm sure it could be used in many other areas. And I got this interest in HR. This opportunity came up in HR. I thought, wow, this sounds amazing, and made the leap across and kind of never looked back. Really, been working with a company in the UK called Talis, and that's where I first crossed path with Riina and the Agile HR community, and completely transformed the way of working for the teams there. And, that's what's led me to be here today.
Brilliant. And I know that you're so modest that you're not bringing up what I like to bring up.
Modest.
Yeah, you're too modest, because Steve has been started with one team or two teams in Talis, helping them set up a really sustainable way of working, sustainable agile way of working. And they improved their performance. Was it 72% over a 9-month period? Yeah. Because you were following up the metrics. And this team, the work throughput was 72% more by 9 months when going into the agile model. So I think, and it is, there is a lot to kind of thank the team for, but you have been bringing in the structures, the way of working, and helping the team improve gradually all the time. And I think this is magnificent. I think I've never seen this kind of a metric for a HR team. So well done, Stephen. We are looking forward to picking your brain for sure. Good, so let's kick off. First, a really couple of minutes introductions about what is Scrum and what the Scrum Guide says, and what on earth is a Scrum Master. It sounds like some kind of wizard, and it kind of is. So let's hear, Steve, please, would you take us through a little background?
Yeah, so this is, the little bit of theory you're going to get today. So this is kind of the first place to look for some clues of what the Scrum Master role is all about. I'm just going to read these couple of sentences and just pick out a couple of words from them. So the Scrum Master is accountable for establishing Scrum as defined in the Scrum Guide. They do this by helping everyone understand Scrum theory and practice, both within the Scrum team and the organization. So I think what is quite interesting here is you think, okay, helping everyone understand Scrum. It's like, it doesn't sound too bad, does it? A bit of theory, I can cope with that. Then you dig in a bit further, you think, oh, okay, you've got to help everyone understand it, both in the team and the organization. So you're like, well, how big's my organization? Could have my work cut out here, couldn't I? And then even beyond that, it gets even more difficult when you go on to the next one. The Scrum Master is accountable for Scrum team's effectiveness. And they do that by enabling the Scrum team to improve its practices with the framework. So you're going to have to be pretty confident with this framework and understand what you're doing to run with it. And also very interesting about it being accountable, the Scrum Master being accountable for team's effectiveness. So you start to see here that actually the Scrum Master needs to measure their success by the success of the team. So there's a different way of looking at how you operate as a person there as well. Okay, just quickly whipping on then. So the Scrum Guide also references these 3 specific areas that the Scrum Master has to serve. One is the development team. So, as it's mentioned earlier, you're responsible for helping the team to be effective. You also serve the product owner, and this is all around helping them create a backlog of work, be clear about what their goals are for the team, and making sure the team can understand the work that they've decided should go ahead. And there's also the organization. So the third part there, this is all around scaling up Agile. You may be successful at a team level, but how much further can you spread the success? Have you got the capacity to start moving up through the levels of the organization to complete the transformation?
I think this is just by working quite a lot with companies that are new to Agile, the Scrum Master role hasn't really existed. It is a new role in our organizations, and it's really difficult for many people to understand, what is this role doing? They are not accountable for actual work. They are kind of in between these roles. They have an organizational element. They're helping product owners, and they're kind of facilitating the team without being a leader. And I think what is important is that the Scrum Guide is a great asset for us. It kind of is a never-ending aspiration to work towards, but we probably will never be there in organizations. Very few Scrum teams are perfect Scrum teams, and we always have more things to improve. I think I want to share one thing, Steve, that so I've been trained by Jeff Sutherland, who is the father of Scrum. I've been taking some Scrum at Scale trainer events, and I'm in good connections with Jeff. And I love how he's telling the story about how Scrum came to be, because quite many people don't know how Scrum came to be. And people think they've just come up with a framework of how you work Agile and then implemented that. No, Scrum came to be through an evolutionary journey where software teams working, Jeff was working in, I think, 2 or 3 companies with IT projects worth 50 million US dollars in a couple of companies. And in these projects and initiatives, this way of working was evolutionalized. Kind of through evolution, they came up with, how can we work in a smarter way? So it's been going on for 10 years before they ended up with a framework saying, now we found it, now this works quite well. That's where it comes from. So it's an evolutionary journey to an Agile way of working. And now it's known everywhere. I think Scrum is used, or some kind of Scrum, for people say about 70% of teams are using some kind of Scrum. Jeff Sutherland himself says that just a small fraction of them are using Scrum properly. But yeah, I think it's important to remember that. Let's move a bit towards that role. So for a Scrum Master, it's not just, you have to be quite multi-talented to do Scrum Mastering. Steve, would you like to talk us through the hats?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, you've had a little bit of theory. So I was going to kind of talk a little bit around some of the things you would see a Scrum Master do. There's many different hats that a Scrum Master can wear, and they change them regularly as well. But this was just to walk you through some of the more common hats that I seem to keep flicking on and off all day, every day. So I guess a lot of people, when they think of Scrum Master, if they've got any insight into the role, they would immediately think of coaching, both one-to-one and team level coaching, facilitating, and helping the team. So they're the main roles, but what else? What else do I seem to be doing on a day-to-day basis? So I've given these hats little names. First one I've called it the scientist. So the scientist hat. So when you've got this one on, that data trumps opinion. You're looking at evidence, trying to find the empirical data and understand what it's telling us. You love to run experiments, constantly asking, what would happen if we try this? What if we tried it this way? What about that way? Monitoring those tests as well. Did things change as we expected? You see teams writing hypothesis, so measurement, tracking. Did we do what we set out to do? All right, so I'm going to flick to the next hat now, which is the journalist, which it ties in nicely with the scientist, really. The scientist can bring up all these lovely pieces of data, all this evidence, but without the journalist, they're the person who creates the narrative. They're going to tell the story. They're the people who can really influence change in your organization. They're using that data to really drive change. Brilliant role that is. What's my next one? The guard, security guard, the policeman, the cop, whatever you want to call him. Okay, so this one I call it's like the protector of the realm. You know, you're protecting the team from noise, even protecting the teams from themselves sometimes. You know, when perhaps the team are trying to shortcut their quality standard, for example, so calling to account on that, as well as sometimes being a little bit unpopular with the word no, because you might be seen to use it too often in some people's opinions. But you know, that's your role, protector. All right, next one along, I've got call this one the kindergarten kid. So for any of you who've got children, do you remember when they were about 4 years old? How many questions did they ask? How mad did they drive you? So this is what this one's all about. You know, you're not afraid to ask silly questions. You're constantly probing, trying to get to the truth of the matter. It's not just for your benefit, it's for the team's benefit. So they all get a clear, common understanding of problems and, you know, experiments, just ideas. That's what that one is all about, asking lots of questions. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next one, which I call the cameraman. So the cameraman hat. So this is the observer, the watcher, the listener, you know, recording evidence and playing it back to the team. What have you seen in and around the team that you think is important? You know, let the team see, you know, play back, let the team see how they're performing, what they've been doing, and challenging each other. Is this really the way we want to be seen, the way we want to work together?
I think here I just want to jump on this one, because when you recognize a pattern, when you see a behavior, when you listen to the communication of the team and recognize there's something that might be important for the team. What is also important is kind of, I call this kind of the Buddhist way of doing things. It's like, I will offer this to you, but I'm not very connected to what you do with it. So I'm not making a decision. I'm not pushing. I'm not saying that you should change. I'm offering this to you as a transparent, you know, this is what's happening in my opinion. Is it, or is it not? And then we do something with it as a team. I think that's important. It's not like, you know, I'm not there in a position of power, right?
Just presenting the evidence and say, hey, you know, are we going to, what do you want to do with this? Yeah. Right, my last one on there. Okay, so there's a lot of serious stuff, a lot of hard work going on. Sometimes you have to put the comedian hat on, be a bit of a joker, lighten the mood, make help the team get through the day on those really tough, difficult days. You know, just be there to help the team. I suppose sometimes devil's advocate might come in under that a little bit as well, being a little bit playful, challenging decisions. So yeah, so you know, I'm sure there's more hats, but they're some of the more common ones that you're constantly juggling around. I think one lesson I've got from this is not to wear one hat for too long either. You know, if for example if you're being a comedian all the time, you're suddenly being in a position where you're not taken seriously anymore. Or you know, if you're a journalist without any data to back you up, you know, you can lose a bit of credibility then. It's like, well, why should we change this? You know, well, you got to tell me it's a good idea that we go down this route. So yes, just it's constantly changing, constantly looking for different ways to help the team, balancing it, just to
And I think
what
you're saying here is, while we have this many roles when we're Scrum Mastering or coaching a team, we have to be very aware of our own behavior ourselves, because we're never going to feel perfect. You're always going to feel that, oh, I could have done that better, or I missed bringing this up in a good way, or there's always going to be, like when you're a leader, you recognize that, oh, I can always improve. That's the same when it's kind of a servant leader role of a role when you are a Scrum Master. There are so many things you can do, and you do your best with the toolkit and behavior and your maturity that you have. And that's why it's such an interesting role to have and to work with, I think. If we move a bit forward, there was a question, what's the first two hats, by the way? Oh, thank you, somebody helped.
So the first two were the scientist. So the person who
scientists and journalists, where you look into data and show the evidence and are asking the team to continuously kind of follow their work, so they understand what they're working with, what the value is, how much their capacities, or all of that. And the journalist is the storyteller, or how to get your story across, how to get the narrative across, how to really communicate with people that in a way where you influence both the team and the environment around the team. The police officer hat is interesting. I usually say that the Scrum Master is not a police, but we are, you said, the protector of the realm, and that's what I really
yeah.
Right. We protect Scrum. We want to do great Scrum. So yeah, absolutely. I have a couple of more hats that I thought about when I saw this slide. When you do Scrum Mastering and you start going beyond the team, so of course we help the team, but as a Scrum Master and a coach, there starts being tensions and dependencies and problems that pop up that are beyond the team. So I also have a leader here. So we kind of need to be a leader for organizational issues, being able to raise conversations and bring up impediments and negotiate with other parts of the organization. And this leadership style is kind of the thing that we're used to in HR without a mandate or position or hierarchy. That's how we lead. We lead through our person, we lead through influencing, we lead through welcoming people to conversation. We lead through creating environments where people can solve problems together. So I think that could be added, kind of a servant leader / non-hierarchical leader. I have a nudger here. I'm not sure if that's a word, but nudging people to do things, not kicking them or not reminding them, not being their mother. But for example, if you work with a product owner, they are so busy all the time. It would be helpful if a Scrum Master just nudges them to say, hey, last time when we had the review, we agreed on an improvement to your backlog descriptions or something. I'll just remind you to remember this when you are improving the backlog for our next planning session, for example. So you help people succeed with nudges as well. And then I have a translator or interpreter. How do you say that in English?
That's right, interpreter, yes.
Interpreter. And why is that? Because communication mistakes. Because people who are talking about the banana and another person is talking about banana, they're not talking about the same thing. And that happens all the time, right? So when you're with the team and they are speaking about the technical thing or how to build an integration somewhere in software, or if we speak with non-software people about how they're going to be building a HR service or a new onboarding or what it means to do career steps, you recognize that, wow, these 5 people are talking about careers and they're talking about different things. So you have to start listening very carefully and helping these people to understand each other. So that's why kind of translator / interpreter. Yeah, so those are a couple of additional roles that I would add here. What are your thoughts, Steve?
I like them. Yes, I think I see that pretty regularly, especially which one do I like? All of them. I liked all of them, but yeah, that you have to listen very carefully when you very often hear people talking on the same thing but on different levels. It's just pull them back together. It's like, hey, come on, guys.
Exactly.
You sure you understand? Yeah.
I tend to use this when I see there's a misunderstanding in the room, even with leadership teams. I tend to say, okay, let's all take a minute, write down your interpretation of what you just heard, and let's share that. And when they start sharing that, they recognize that, wow, we aren't aligned at all, and you don't have to do anything else than that, pretty much. Yeah. All right, let's look at this. Let's first stop for a couple of questions before keeping it interactive. So Sherry from London, thank you for your question. It is high on the agenda here. Sherry's asking, I am starting a project to roll out Agile in HR. Curious how Steve measured the work throughput. Sounds like a good idea to measure now and again in 12 months. Would you like to share, Steve, a little bit around your metrics?
Yes.
What is important?
Okay, so I had to start by getting a common workflow in place. So particular example I use is with the TA team I was working with. So everyone was working in different ways. We established a common sort of process, high level process, steps they wanted to go through. And then we started to measure how long things were taking to get through this process, how many were getting through the process, and through that, that was our first measurement, if you like. It's time in stage, so we're measuring some cycle times, and also the amount we were getting through. So in that example, it was, how many roles could we fill in a certain time. It started off with maybe, I can't remember, it was like 10 a month, and I think at the moment we're over 100 a month at the moment, but just recording that. Another tip is to make sure you have a time box as well. So if you say, for example, we're going to take a check every 4 weeks to see how we're doing, it becomes very difficult if you start changing that time box. So it's like, okay, we're going to try 3 weeks now. It makes your metrics really hard to track over time once you start doing that. So it's really important to try and to think about a time box and what works for you the best.
I'm thinking about Sherry's question, and a couple of things that we've done is, so first of all, when you start, look into estimation. If you haven't, estimation isn't probably the first thing you bring into an Agile team, because they're not ready to start measuring their work immediately. So be careful of what you are adopting and in what pace. It might be good to start adopting. So sometimes we start adopting t-shirt sizes first. We say, okay, let's start looking at everything that comes into on our backlog, and let's put them in buckets. Are they extra small? They might take less than half a day to do. Are they small? They take less than a day to do. Are they medium sized? Less than 3 days to do. Are they large? 5 days, and we don't want extra large at all on the backlog. You need to break it down into smaller parts. And that's when we start seeing, okay, we've got these numbers for these different t-shirt sizes, and we start measuring how many of different sizes go through in, for example, a 3-week period or 4-week period. So that's when we start seeing our throughput of work. And in non-IT teams where you can't really, to put, for example, build an integration to HR master data that's coming in as a to-do, or write instructions on how to do development discussions for the managers, or create a video about that. So those are coming in. You can't really put a number on that. How much time do you think that takes? But you can say that, okay, building the integration to master data is a bigger task. Maybe that's a week of work, so a medium or large, and that creating a short video clip for introductions into how to have a development discussion could be a 3-day task with a good production company to help us. So we might have that conversation easier when we are working with non-IT teams with these kind of buckets of sizing. Does that make any sense? Sherry, would you like to comment on what we just mentioned?
Yes, that's very helpful. Thank you. I haven't actually started this project yet, but it's a company I've worked at previously, and they said, "Oh, can you come in and help us roll out Agile in HR?" I said yes, and then I'm thinking, but yeah, that was really helpful to think about the bucket sizes and start there.
Yeah, I think that what I'm seeing in many HR teams is that there is reluctance to spend time on estimation because they think, oh, we know our work. We don't want to follow up our work in this detail. So you can bring that in a bit later, the estimation and understanding really about the workload, etc., and the capacity. I would bring that in after 3-4 sprints, maybe. What would you say, Steve?
Yeah, I think you definitely need 2 to 3 sprints to just start understanding the work.
Yeah,
so the team have that common understanding. Unless you've seen something go through, if you got a new Agile framework set up, you got to see stuff run through it to understand how it works and get an idea of the size. So yeah, say at least 2, 3. Preferably.
I would agree. Let's have one more question. So we have a question from an anonymous person. Product owner is also a new role in HR. I'm curious, what are the better ways to introduce these new roles to the organization? Ooh, sweet. So what are we thinking about? So introducing the roles to the organization. A thing that I think is really good is, so product owner is much easier to introduce. It's a person who knows about the product, who can carry the responsibility of the customer value, to really understand what the customers, users, stakeholders need, and can translate that into a list of releases, backlog, etc. So it's a much easier role to describe to a new to Agile organization. Practically, from HR, it would probably be a process owner or a journey owner or experience owner that becomes a product owner. So it's easier to introduce. But the Scrum Master, I think that, what are your thoughts around introducing Scrum Master to people who really don't know what that is?
I think if organizations are really serious about wanting to introduce Scrum, they need to respect the 3 roles. I mean, Scrum only calls out 3 roles: the Scrum Master, product owner, and the team. There's a well-known saying that Scrum, it's easy to understand but difficult to implement. And I think without a Scrum Master, you are going to struggle to implement this framework into an organization. So I think there's got to be an element of challenge there, that if companies are really serious about it, they really need to consider and think hard how many Scrum Masters they get in to support the number of teams they're looking to spin up. And even beyond that, you could consider agile coaches as well, who are used to operating at a bit of a higher level as well. You see so many teams failing without a Scrum Master. They're just struggling to understand all the concepts and just have that experience of challenge. When people challenge you, it's like, oh, this sounds really out there. Is this really going to work? Without that full understanding of how to coach your team and the benefits it can bring.
Yeah. I think that one thing that I tend to use is to say that Agile is as much about how we work than it is about what we're doing. And the Scrum Master is owning the how we work. They are the skilled persons. They've done that before. They are 5 steps ahead of the rest of the organization, and they can bring others along to the how we work. If you're missing out that piece, you're only focusing on what, and the product owner is not a coach. They are not a person who is usually there to help the team. They're focused on the product, on the outcome, and the team should start becoming self-managing and bringing in these new ways of working, and specifically new ways of thinking and new ways of behaving. And without a proper guidance and a person who can call them out and help them and make them see great ways and give them opportunities and self-confidence to try things out, the Scrum Master will speed up agility massively. If you don't have that, it's going to be trial and error all over and over again, and at some point you will end up saying, oh, Agile doesn't work, right? So I think if you really want to do this properly, I nowadays say bring a coach in, bring somebody in who's done that before, and you will be up and running with a team in less than 2 or 3 sprints, where they start understanding how this is, and then the Scrum Master who is experienced can start handing over Scrum Mastering to a new Scrum Master that then catches up at some point. Yeah, awesome question. So let's move forward. We were thinking about discussing, what does a Scrum Master really do, and how is it different from software teams in non-software teams? And I thought that I would put up the kind of process of Scrum. So we have different parts of Scrum for those who are not familiar with that. So you can have some visual in front of you. So what does a Scrum Master do? Here is parts of the process that we're working according. First, pre-project or pre-product development. There's a lot of stuff happening there as well. Should we start with this? Do we do a design sprint before to understand our customers better? Then we start working with the product owner to say, okay, wow, we now need to know the vision. We have to have a very clear picture of what we're aiming towards. We might not know exactly what we're doing, and the specifications are coming later, and we're building the backlog, but we have to understand what's the outcome, what's the value, who is benefiting from this, and what are we not going to build as well. Then preparing the backlog refinement together with the PO and maybe some stakeholders to really understand how to start building the backlog. And this is difficult in non-IT teams, in my opinion. Really difficult, because we're not talking about software that can be released every week. We're talking about very, very different types of value deliveries, all the way from what a new performance management system, performance management process and services to global onboarding virtually, to leadership development, to create modern leaders. All of these are very, very different types of things. So you're not building the backlog in the same way as you would for a software project. Then we go into backlog refinement, sprint planning, sprinting, having the dailies, reviewing what's built in the sprint, having a retrospective where people and the teams are improving how they work, maybe having demos with stakeholders or users after some sprints, and then other things as well. So what are we doing, Steve? What are we working with? Because a lot of our work is invisible.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so I think specifically different areas that I find in HR that I spend a lot of time on, you kind of called it already, it's the front end of this. So right from the start, making sure problems are understood. So I spend a lot of time in defining problem statements. So actually, do you really know what the problem is here, and how are you going to know when it's fixed? Spend a lot of time there.
Fantastic question, by the way. Pick that up. How do you know what the real problem is, and how do you know if you have fixed it?
Yeah.
Super important.
Yeah, and it's a big difference as well. I think, as you said, a lot of IT teams are set up around certain technology or a certain product, and they've got fairly good experience in it. What's I see in HR, lots of different projects coming along, and it's not so easy to have a long-lived team. So quite often I see a need to spin up teams with different skill sets in them from across the HR function. I think that's a massive difference that I see.
Yeah. And then I think the project, if you think about the kind of first parts of what we do, or before the project even starts,
yeah,
we need to understand a very complex network of stakeholders.
Yeah.
While if we work in a global organization, there are people who are owning just kind of siloed parts of HR. Some are owning the reward, and somebody's owning the performance management structures, and it goes all the way to the board. So to start touching one part, there are so many dependencies in HR. Or for example, I was working with this customer team, the sales. They were creating new products for banking customers, and they also recognize that they've got so many dependencies. If they want to build a new product or a service, they need to go back, kind of backtrack the processes to all of these upstream. Is it upstream, downstream? Which one is it? Parties that deliver work to them. If they want to create something new, they are dependent, right? So quite often in software, we have teams that have, they start from scratch. You've got your architecture, your tech stack. You might have some requirements, but then go ahead and build that product. It's not always that connected to everything if you're not working on a scaled project, of course.
Okay, another
what else are we doing?
So sprint planning can be very different as well, depending on the teams that you're working with. So some teams are delivering like an ongoing service. So you'd be focusing more on a continuous stream of work rather than working in sprints, for example. So you've even got different hats within the Agile framework that sometimes you need to swap on and off as well.
And here I'm guessing that many of the teams that are working with an ongoing structure of work, they start using Kanban instead of Scrum, right?
Yeah. Important there though, the Scrum framework has loads of tools in there that really enrich that Kanban process, and without it, I don't think it adds as much value as bringing in these Scrum tools, such as stopping the retros, the reviews. Let's stop and reflect and embed that continuous improvement loop.
When you say, you know, what does a Scrum Master do? It's really difficult to say to people who don't know what this is. But I tend to say, here is what the teams are doing, in what needs to happen, and we practically prepare to facilitate and run each of these. We are preparing that they happen, and they happen with high quality and a nice atmosphere and high trust. And that's what we're building all the time. So if you think about what your time goes to as a Scrum Master, is just not the sprint planning, which might take 3 hours, maybe half a day for a 3-4 week sprint. 3 hours for sprint planning. But for you to plan for the sprint planning, you might have worked 2 days to actually get that sorted on how we're going to run that. What are the difficulties coming up? What does the backlog look like? Is it clear enough? Has the PO clarified how to describe the customer needs? Do we need a vision kind of session there? Do we need to bring in customers to talk about what they really need and remind us about their important things? Any changes going on? So quite a lot of stuff of work and thinking and preparing goes into just organizing a 3-hour sprint planning.
Yeah, definitely a lot of time prepping and a lot of time with the team, you know, creating the right atmosphere for the team. You know, it's well documented about psychological safety and how important that is. So, you know, that's completely in the Scrum Master's realm to start improving the atmosphere and the environment the team are working in completely.
Yeah. And what do you do when people say, what do you do when they're actually doing work, doing sprinting? So what is the Scrum Master doing when they're sprinting?
They're spending a lot of time with the product owner. You know, they're always looking forward. So, okay, the team are off. We can, you know, focus some time on what's coming up now. So you're always looking forward. You still, you know, you don't completely drop the team. You've still got these calls every morning. It's like, hi team, how are you doing? What's your plan for today? You still on track to reach this goal that we agreed at our last planning session? Sometimes they are. Sometimes they're like, oh no, I had this thing yesterday, so I just don't know how to get around it. So, you know, you start spending time with the team again. So, okay, how, you know, as a team, what can we do to overcome this obstacle? You know, yeah.
Exactly. And sometimes those obstacles are quite big. So you have to be awake and listen into, okay, is this a big risk for us not to be finishing what we have committed to in the sprint? Do we need to stop work and swarm around it to get it sorted? Do you need my help as a Scrum Master to bring in somebody else from outside the team so that we can sort this out quickly? So there's quite a lot of this quick action and adaptation needed, and you are the hub for that as a Scrum Master as well. Of course, you're not the problem solver. You should not become the kind of person they go to and whine about every problem and, hey, here's Scrum Master, solve this problem. No, absolutely not. But you are there to help the team get everything solved and working towards finishing the sprint. And if there's some blockers that need to be kind of discussed or solved, you are in a very, very important role there. Let's take 2 questions. We have, how does the role of line managers change when we bring in Scrum Masters into organizations? Superb question. Superb. What would you say, Steve?
Wow, interesting question. Yeah. Yes. I also want to point out Scrum Masters don't make good line managers. So that's important that that's recognized as well. You know, line managers, that, you know, you could argue there's still a role for a line manager, but their traditional work would change. So it's more about developing individuals. I'd suggest, you know, the Scrum Master is there to help them with the work. You know, the Scrum Master's not allocating work, but they've got a view of what the product owner wants the product to look like. So they're helping the team to get their work. So the line manager doesn't own that anymore. It's not up to the line manager to give work to their colleagues. You know,
and I think this is a massive, you know, difficulty in organizations going towards the agile models, that they are not recognizing a huge shift in line management roles. If you think about what's happening, you have a line manager in a kind of hierarchical organization, and they have owned what we do, the prioritization of what we do, decision making quite often. So they are making decisions together, of course, with the team if they're a good manager, and also influencing positively, being a servant leader, helping out also with how we work. Now we have two new roles, product owner and Scrum Master, whereas the PO is responsible for what we do, in what order, what the customer needs, etc. That's the PO, but they are not a line manager to the team. Then we have the Scrum Master responsible for how we work and the improvement and the efficiency of the team. They are not the line manager, the manager, or any kind of hierarchical position to the team. And then we have the team members, and they are all on the same level hierarchically. So they're working as a team. All of these are part of the Scrum team, the PO, Scrum Master, and the developers. So what do we have with the line manager? It's actually quite interesting, because I don't want any line managers to come in and try to get capacity of the team to something which is their pet project. I don't want the line manager there to be making decisions about what the team works with, because that's the product owner's decision and that's their job to do. So if you want to influence what we do, speak with the product owner. They own the backlog. You as a line manager, so this is a very important question, because at some point when we work towards agile organizations, we need to start fixing new work for quite many line managers. We might need what you said, capability managers, kind of capability and skills and communities of practice and domain expertise managers. So we see that happening. Managers are moving towards, okay, I am a senior lead designer. I can start helping all the designers in all teams with the design principles, with design tools, bringing in skills and trainings, etc. We see some line managers moving back to becoming engineers or developers and actually loving it. And some line managers are taking up responsibilities as in leading the transformation and the system. They're becoming more systemic leaders and not leading the work. So there are many different role changes there with the line manager. And I think this is so intriguing in organizational agile change. And let's not go deeper into that, but super good question. I had a line manager come up to me when we were working and leading a transformation. We were in, 500, 600 people needed to go into an agile model. We were in 200, 250. And one of the line managers came to me and said, Katarina, who is my team now? I don't have a team. And I said, yeah, that's true. You don't have a team. There are many teams, and you are in the HR system. Your hierarchical position is approving something in Workday for them, but you are not leading their work. And this person was kind of devastated to say, I don't know what I should be doing. I was like, yeah, sure. Let's sit down and think about how you can bring the biggest value with what you know. So let's find a role where you can really help this agility start growing. And that's what we did. Let's have another question. Super good questions. The next prioritized one is that I often get feedback from the team that there are too many Scrum meetings, especially when a sprint cycle is short. How can I respond to this kind of feedback? Very good question. Practical, to the point. What do you think, Steve?
I think if it was me, I would dig in a little bit deeper to that to try and find out if there's specifically any one meeting in particular that is causing the problem. Also look at the duration of your meetings. If you've got a short sprint, then your meetings would generally be shorter as well. That's another thing I'd be looking at. All the Scrum meetings have a defined purpose. So it might be worth canvassing opinion across the team, across these different meetings. These are the value we're supposed to be getting. Do you believe, we're hitting the expectation on these? Got to be open conversation on it.
Bringing up the specifics and being very clear on what is the problem, and then starting to have ideas on how to fix it. I think a couple of things what I've learned with non-IT teams is that 1 or 2 week sprints is too short. Quite often we have dependencies across the organization, and we can't get a lot of, not as much, the work isn't as frequent as it is with the software. And I think that I often ask, how often do we need to get together to plan? So what is the frequency of change around us? If the frequency of change that impacts our project is very high, then we need to have a high heartbeat as well with the planning. If we're not expecting that much change, we might have 3-4 week sprints to be able to maybe have less of the meetings. And with HR teams, we tend not to have daily meetings if it's not a really kind of high frequency project where we're delivering something in a quarter. But if it's a project where we have half a year, big one, we might have 2 weekly meetings instead of daily. So Tuesdays, Thursdays or something. And so I think Scrum Guide says you should do this, but Scrum Guide is a framework. And when you have a framework, and the whole point with agility is let's improve something and try something else. If it works better for us, then let's keep it. If it didn't work better, toss it and try something else. So we're continuously innovating our ways of working. And that's your job as a Scrum Master, to do this with the team, to say, hey, okay, if everyday Scrum meetings isn't working out for you, what do you expect would work better? We discuss it, we agree, okay, let's do Tuesdays, Thursdays for 20 minutes in the morning, and let's see where we are. But you have to prepare for those meetings. And then we try it out for a sprint and say, okay, how did that work? Much better. Great. Should we keep it or should we change something there as well? Maybe we should change something and then we change something again. So this is how we improve our ways of working all the time. I'd love to talk a bit more about the differences about Scrum non-IT teams and IT teams when you facilitate. What are your thoughts, Steve? Would you list some differences?
Yeah, I'd say so. The biggest difference I've seen are definitely with the people, if I'm honest. So I see a lot more enthusiasm, engagement, wanting to change in HR teams than I have seen in IT. So that is, as for a Scrum Master, I love that. It's so nice to come into a meeting and everyone's like, yeah, come on, let's do this, let's get on with it, let's make our world better. So for me, that's why I love being in HR at the moment. I love it.
Yeah, it's like when you bring in some tools or techniques or facilitation things, people are just immediately there. They're just working with you, working together, communicating so well. Yeah.
So I think there is one word of warning in that though, because what I find with HR people is they spend so much time wanting to please everybody that sometimes they might take on a little too much. So that's another actual big difference on the opposite side of the coin. IT teams are well versed in saying no and understanding their capacity, whereas I see that as a big challenge in HR, because we want to please everybody. Sometimes we do too much, and even we need to look after ourselves a bit more as well, be a bit more realistic sometimes.
I can see a couple of differences. First of all, when I work with software, they are usually teams that are built around a product. So they are allocated, if not 100%, almost at least, maybe there's roles like an architect or a designer that they kind of bring in for the product to some sprints, but they are mainly allocated to work together. If we work in non-IT teams, sales and service development and HR and communications, everyone almost has business as usual. So part of their work is somewhere else and they're participating in this agile product development. And that's just how it is. So we can't do perfect agile, perfect Scrum there. We have to be very aware of what we can do, what the maturity is, what we can stretch the team towards, and how much we have time and capacity to work with. So that's one thing that I kind of would pick up. The other thing is that the release planning is really difficult. So release planning in software, it's like, okay, which features are we going to build into our application, or what's going to be on our website when we first release it, and what are we going to build there later? Now, when we talk about a non-software product, it's like, for example, we're building a new hybrid onboarding practice to a global company. how do we even start breaking it down into where do we start first? What can we release to the organization? And that is where you need to be on top of how you do release planning in non-IT, so that a release is always something that has value to the users, has value to the customers, to the organization. And quite often I see non-IT agile teams being stuck in the waterfall type of thinking. So let's get a plan, and the plan is our release. No, it's not a release. That's not valuable to anyone to have a plan. You have to think about how you chunk it down. So for example, for onboarding, maybe it's the first week experience. Let's create the first week experience. That's our first release. Let's build that. That's one part. We are sorry, it is time to start wrapping up. We've got 1 minute. So I just want to say thank you for spending time with us today. Thank you so much, Steve, for sharing some of your valuable experience and tips and tricks, and share where you're, what you have done so well with teams.
You're welcome.
I hope that you picked up on a couple of tips here, and it was valuable to spend an hour with us. Hope to see you in the training, the Scrum Master training that we run. And if not, and nothing else, look into everything you find about Scrum Mastering. It's a fantastic profession for HR people if you want to start moving into the business side, because we know how to facilitate. We are quite good with people. We are, have been working with conflicts and working with communication without the hierarchical position before. And I can see HR people become quite amazing Scrum Masters. So thank you, everyone. And Steve, do you want to say a couple of words?
Thanks for the invite. It's been a pleasure, and I hope all of you picked up a few tips, and maybe we sparked your interest in becoming a Scrum Master. It's a fantastic role.
Ciao, everyone. Thank you for today.
Thank you.